back again, friends, to another episode of The Bible Yogi. I am your host, Douglas Roberts. Good to see you all. I've been very busy following the episodes with Edward Elkins. I just had a lot of catching up to do with the house and that kind of thing. But I'm getting back on track with today's episode about the 10 plagues of Egypt. This is from the books of Exodus, and it continues the story of Moses, who, you know, me nominating Abraham as the greatest Old Testament prophet ever notwithstanding, most people would conclude that Moses is the most powerful and therefore the greatest Old Testament prophet, almost without a doubt. So, you know, it's hard to argue. It's kind of like the LeBron James, Michael Jordan, argument. You're not wrong no matter who you pick. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, we're moving on to the 10 plagues. God has revealed himself to Moses as the great I Am, the God above all gods, the creator. And he says, now go and release my people. And he's going to do it in a way that is quite different from the way God rescued Lot and his family from Sodom and Gomorrah. If you recall that story, the angels came to visit on Lot, and Lot entertained them. As the book of Hebrews says, many have entertained angels unawares. And that's what happened to Lot. And they pulled him inside when a mob came to, abuse the angels. And they struck the crowd with blindness. Long story short, the angels rescued Lot's family. And then fire and brimstone rained from heaven and destroyed the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So that's one way God could rescue people. But to the Egyptian empire, remember, God has a certain degree of compassion for the Egyptians. If you remember the story of Joseph, when he brought Joseph down into Egypt, sold as a slave by his brothers, the 12 sons of Israel and 12 sons of Jacob, Jacob's ladder and all that. But Joseph was the one who interpreted the dreams of the 7 years of plenty, followed by the 7 years of famine. And the Egyptian empire rescued the entire world, or the entire known world at the time, right? That were at least that part of the earth that was under the severe drought for 7 years. So along comes Moses. He's born of a Hebrew. He's raised by Pharaoh's daughter. And he already tried to redeem his people by his own hands when he murdered the Egyptian. Then it became known he fled to the country of Midian, where he took a wife, Zipporah, whose father was Jethro, the Midianite. And he has a great role to play later on in the book of Exodus. Maybe he comes in Numbers. But anyway, he has a great role to play. You'll see. So here's what happened. Moses came back to Egypt after he went to Midian, and soon they struck, or God and Moses, I guess, working together, struck Egypt with the 12 plagues. And they were, as shown here by being image creator, the plague of blood, when they turned the Nile into blood, the plague of frogs, gnats, flies. They killed a bunch of livestock, boils on the people, hail, locusts, darkness, and then finally the death of the firstborn. So let's go through this story and learn what we may. And I wanted to say one of the reasons why it took me so long to put together this particular episode was because it's a very straightforward story. There's not a whole ton of foreshadowing, but there is some very important prophetic foreshadowing, which we will cover. But there's just not a lot I can add to the narrative as it is. So I can abbreviate it for you and then get to the good part. So that's what we'll do. After the burning bush, God reveals to Moses his plan to rescue the children of Israel from the Egyptian servitude. Plagues. But before we get to the plagues, we need to discuss some recurring themes in the book of Exodus. Specifically, Moses' reluctance. He didn't want this charter or this ministry, He kept this conversation. We will recount it right here, but it must have happened a half dozen times. And whenever Moses was going off to talk to somebody, he would say, "Lord, I can't. I'm not eloquent." And God would say, "Well, you go. I got you." Anyway, we'll read it. And Moses said unto the Lord, "Oh, my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore," meaning I've never been, not before now or now, "nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue." Now, if he's correct, Moses sounds like is he saying I'm kind of dim-witted? What is he saying here? Slow of speech, slow of tongue. Maybe he's just being deliberate, right? And the Lord said unto him, "Who hath made man's mouth? Or who maketh the dumb, or deaf, or the seeing, or the blind? Have not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say." So the Lord's having none of this. You're my guy. There is no relief pitcher warming up in the bullpen. Get out there and fulfill your commission, Moses. And Moses said, "Oh, my Lord, send, I pray thee, by the hand of whoever thou wilt," meaning don't send me. So here's Moses arguing with God about whether or not he's the one to go rescue the people. It's amazing. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well. He's got the gift of gab, like some people I could mention. And also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee, and when he seeth thee, he'll be glad in his heart. And thou shalt speak unto him, and put words in his mouth, and I will be with thy mouth, and with his mouth, and I will teach you what you shall do. And he shall be thy spokesman unto the people, and ye shall be, even as he shall be to thee instead of a mouth, and thou shalt be to him instead of God." So what that all means is that it used to be, these are hand puppets, God talking to Moses, but Moses didn't want that, so now it's Moses talking to Aaron, right? So we just abstracted the whole procedure a little bit. Instead of God to Moses, now God, Moses, Aaron. No big deal. The plan moves on. But boy, I tell you, this conversation about Moses saying send somebody else, it's a recurring theme. It happened quite a bit, a couple of chapters worth. So God wants to embolden Moses. He wants to give him the courage to go, to fulfill this commission, right? It's one thing. Jesus ran into the same thing. He said to the Pharisees at one point, which is easier to say, take up your pallet and walk, to some guy who's born lame, or thy sins are forgiven, right? And the Pharisees all mutter. And he said, "So you know that the Son of Man has power to forgive sins on the earth. Take up your pallet and walk," right? So he performed a miracle. Jesus performed a miracle to prove that he was the Son of God and he could forgive sins. So in the same way, God gives Moses these miracles on demand so that he can prove that he is indeed a prophet of God. Very simple. So, Exodus chapter 4, verses 1 through 9. God gave Moses 3 miracles to show his brother Aaron, the elders of Israel, and Pharaoh in order to confirm his calling. The first one was turning a walking stick into a snake. And I got this excellent picture from Bing Creator. Love it. Then turn your hand into leprosy and then heal it just as quick. He's going to take his hand, stick it in his shirt, pulls it out, and it's leprous as snow. That's like all the flesh on your hand dies. Then he puts it back in his shirt, pulls it back out, and it's healed. Ta-da! And then turns water into blood, takes a pitcher full of water, dumps it on the ground, and poof, it's blood. So those 3 miracles were supposed to convince everybody that Moses was indeed a prophet of the Most High God, and these are curious miracles. They always sounded like they'd be miracles to me. You don't see magicians doing this kind of stuff nowadays, taking a stick and throwing it on the ground, having it turn into a snake. I've never seen David Copperfield or Penn and Teller or any of those guys do something like that, right? So it'd be a bona fide miracle. And I had this little thought that why I said this book of the Bible is very straightforward. There's very little foreshadowing in it. It's one of the more no-nonsense books in the whole Bible. And people can get a little bit weird. And, for example, turning a walking stick into a snake, people might say, aha, when Jesus gave his disciples the Great Commission, they were supposed to take a walking stick, and then Jesus said, be harmless as doves, but wise as serpents. Aha! And connect the dots. And I'm here to tell you that no. Let's not do that to ourselves. We will drive ourselves crazy if we start trying to see connections like that. So I thought it was actually instructional to show you how not to make connections in the Bible, because people can get carried away. I know you won't believe it. I know it's tough to believe, but people get carried away with this stuff. And then turn your hand leprous and heal it just as quick. Well, Jesus healed a leper too. It's like, yeah, okay, all right, there you go. Turn water into blood. Well, at the wedding of Cana, Jesus turned water into wine, and then later at the Last Supper, he didn't exactly turn water into blood, but he said, for a cup of wine, this is my blood. Drink it in remembrance of me. Okay, but there's nothing to be made from that. There's no revelation in that, and that's why you don't make those kinds of connections. Prophecy is where we make the connections, okay? Or revelation. Something about the character of God. Does it reveal the character of God, or does it predict something that will happen, or affirm something that happened was of God? That kind of thing. Not just, oh, he talked of a snake and he talked of a snake, it must be God. You'll drive yourself crazy with that kind of thing. Anyway, had to get that out. And the Lord said unto him, what is thine hand? And he said, a rod. So in Exodus chapter 4, verses 9, is where we go through those three little miracles. Now, another little chapter in there, Moses forgets to circumcise his son. And it came to pass by the way in the end, so he's returning from Midian. He's gotten the commission from God, he's gotten the miracles, and now he's heading off to Egypt, back to Egypt, to go free the Hebrews, and he hasn't fulfilled some of the law of God, specifically the circumcision of his children. So it came to pass by the way in the inn that the Lord met him and sought to kill him. All this, and God's willing to start all over again. Then Zipporah, Moses' wife, took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at his feet, and said, surely a bloody husband art thou to me. So God let him go. Then she said, a bloody husband thou art, because of the circumcision. See, whatever Midian was, which I don't really know, we know that circumcision was not one of their traditions. So the wife didn't want to do it until she was about to get killed by the Lord. Sure, this guy is definitely a prophet, so we will obey, right? Moses and Aaron showed the Jewish elders. Now, I made mention of it before, but it's important. They had to get the buy-in from the Jewish elders, who were, of course, the leaders of all the Hebrews, who were all the slaves, right? And Aaron spake all the words which the Lord had spoken unto Moses about delivering them, and did the signs, the hand, the snake, and the blood. And the people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had visited the children of Israel, that he looked upon their affliction, that they bowed their heads in worship. So these Jews were people of faith. They had cried out to the Lord. They had prayed to the Lord, rescue us from these oppressive Egyptians, And so they now saw that God was coming to free them. Now Moses and Aaron before Pharaoh. A glitch in the matrix, if you will. Moses performed the three miracles, but then so do the Egyptian magicians. And this is kind of curious because in the article volume, when Pontius Pilate was talking about, Herod was talking about who Jesus was, he had said that they knew that Joseph and Mary had escaped to Egypt and come back, right? And so they made the connection there that Jesus must have learned all this necromancy and, raising the dead and all this stuff. They learned it from the Egyptian magicians. So the Egyptian magicians, they had cast a long shadow. This is like Christ was a good 1,400 years after the Israelites fled from Egypt. And afterwards Moses and Aaron went and told Pharaoh, "Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, and they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness." So, what about that, eh? Just a feast. Is that all you want? Just a feast? And Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go." And I detect a theme here. So right away, after that, Moses and Aaron go off. They're kind of shown up, right? The Egyptian magicians did the same miracles. So Pharaoh commanded the same day that the taskmasters of the people and their officers, saying, "You shall no more give the people straw to make brick, as heretofore. Let them go and gather straw for themselves." And the taskmasters of the people went out, and their officers, and they spoke to the people, saying, "Thus saith Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. Go ye, get you straw where you can find it. Yet now not aught of your work shall be diminished. Your quotas remain the same." And the officers of the children of Israel, which Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and demanded, "Wherefore have ye not fulfilled your task in making brick both yesterday and today as heretofore?" And the officers of the children of Israel came and cried unto Pharaoh, saying, "Wherefore dealest thou thus with thy servants? There is no straw given unto thy servants." And they say to us, "Make brick, and behold, thy servants are beaten, but the fault is in thine own people." So far, Moses his little rescue of the Hebrews is going pretty poorly. And I had to find what, and I didn't know what in the world, why do they need straw for brick making? And this is a great picture I found in an old Egyptian, ancient Egypt book. This is a modern day picture. They're still making their bricks, drying them in the sun, and they're still using straw because it's a pretty good method. See, the Nile swells, and then it turns all that nice sediment into some of the best mud for making brick the world's ever seen. That stuff lasts. We still have brick houses from ancient Egypt that we've uncovered in archaeological digs and such. So where does straw come in? Well, straw, if you've ever thrown grass seed on your lawn, and they say put straw over the top of it, and they say, "Oh, now it won't blow away." And it's like, really? It won't? And it's true. Straw it looks like it's just, grass, but it's actually got tons of these little microfibers, almost like centipede legs coming out of the straw. And you throw it down on the ground, and it ain't going anywhere. It sticks right where it is. And so the grass grass seed that you've thrown will kind of stay there too. And the straw sits on top of it and just stays there if it's got any thing to grab on at all, which is kind of weird. These same fibers, when you take a mud pie and put a bunch of straw in there, those fibers, they expand and they spread all out, and it's like they add all kinds of rebar, kind of like straw to brick is like rebar to concrete. Who knew, right? So that mystery is solved, and that's why you need it to make bricks. Otherwise, the bricks aren't going to dry evenly. They'll crack. It's just essential. It's the essential additional component. And now we're going to start the plagues. It was all fun and games until the plagues hit. And I want to go over, there's a template here of the plagues. The plagues follow a specific template, or script, if you will, but it's entirely important and relevant. Moses tells Pharaoh exactly what plague is about to happen. Plague of frogs, plague of darkness, whatever. Announce the plague. Pharaoh says, "I will not let your people go, even if you bring hail." Moses leaves, the plague happens. Kaboom, just as he said. So you have this prophecy going on thing, right? So it's not like, Moses didn't wait for, the frogs to come and then go visit Pharaoh and say, "Aha, see, I did that." Right? Pharaoh's going to go, "What? The frogs were here before you came, get out of here." But 10 times in a row, frogs are coming. Flies are coming. Flies are coming. Lice are coming. Your cattle's gonna die. You might tend to start believing the guy, right? Plague happens. Egypt is destroyed just a little more in a new and different and exciting way. Moses meets with Pharaoh again, saying, well, now will you let my people go? And Pharaoh begs Moses to stop the plague and promises to let the people go. Moses stops the plague. Pharaoh relents on his promise to let the people go. And so this little story just repeats 10 times in a row from the 10 chapters in the first 10 chapters in the book of Exodus for all those 10 plagues. Now here's another real quick thing about how not to read the Bible. I mentioned the thing about the snakes, leprosy and all that, and you don't make those kinds of airheaded connections. Well, one of my favorites was the one where you make this connection that each plague correlates to a god of Egypt. And it's like, well, that's a really great sermon. It really is, And I could see where, Heket was a frog-headed god, so I could see that. They had Hapi was the god of the Nile, and so when the Nile got turned to blood, I could see the correlation there. Gnats and lice, it starts to get a little thin, if you know what I mean. The flies is definitely a little bit thin because this Uchit god, who's also, I think, called Wadjet or something. The only place I even find that is in Bible sites where someone has found this god from some Egyptian pyramid, writing somewhere. Pestilence and livestock, that one I could buy because Hathor was definitely a cow goddess, The boils and sores, there's no god of boils in Egypt. You know what I'm saying? It's like, no. But it mocks the Sekhmet, goddess of healing and war, and Imhotep, god of medicine. It's like, okay. Hail and fire, the sky goddess, Shu and Set. Locusts, Darkness for 3 days, the sun god, Ra. Now that one I would buy. But we're missing one of my favorite gods, and that's Anubis. He's the jackal-headed god that guarded the pathways of the dead. Now, if God would have thrown in there a bunch of jackals storming through Egypt and killing everybody, that would have been cool. I would have said, aha! That connection, you wouldn't have had to say anymore. If you've got Anubis jackals running through Egypt and killing everybody as one of the plagues, boom, then definitely God was doing that. But when I read this, it just seemed like God was using different acts of nature, to prove that God had control over nature, And the reason why I think that also is because I got these 2 links, I'll put them in the description, but we've discovered in the past 100 years there are over 90 Egyptian gods. They had a god for every occasion. They had a god of bugs, god of squids, god of pigs, god of livestock, god of sheep, god of frogs, god of lepers. I mean, when you have that many gods, then the odds are pretty good that when you randomly attack someplace with 10 different plagues, you're gonna, it's gonna line up a little bit. But I don't believe that the God of the Hebrews, my God, my Creator, was somehow, he's going to smite him with a plague of flies and said, hey, Michael, the archangel, hey, come over here. Do the Egyptians have a fly god? I got to make sure before I smite them with the fly plague. No, God, I just can't even envision that at all. It's just flies were convenient. They were a pain. They were just one more... I call it a merciful plague to entice the Egyptians to let the people go. And also, it's important to know that the last plague was the death of the firstborn. This was an important plague. God wanted as many people to believe in him as he could before he smote the Egyptian empire with the death of the firstborn. As you recall, what happens at the death of the firstborn is the Passover supper, where you took the hyssop, you took a lamb, you killed the lamb, drained its blood. You took a branch of hyssop, dipped it in the blood, put it on the lintel. Now we can make that association, that the bitter herbs, the lamb, Christ called himself the Lamb of God, and the Passover was the Last Supper. So there is definitely a prophetic association with the death of the firstborn plague, because Jesus was called the firstborn of God, the firstborn Son of God. And it was interesting that God smote the Egyptians with this plague. He rescued the Hebrews from the same plague, and then he suffered his own son, his own firstborn son, to die on the cross, which was prophesied by the hyssop, putting the blood from the lamb on the doorposts and the lintels, which, as I've said before, coincidentally, you can make a nice crucifixion out of the same kind of wood that you use for a door frame. I've covered this in previous videos, so I won't go over it again. But what do the plagues really mean? They mean complete but compassionate destruction of Egypt. That is, people were convinced that, the God of the Hebrews was real. And when they finally left Egypt, the Bible says, and a mixed multitude went with them. In other words, a lot of non-circumcised Egyptians said, these guys are the winning team, we're going with them. So they were rescued, and they were assimilated into the Hebrew culture also. And I also just wanted to point out that Pharaoh, man, he was one stubborn fool. Finally, once he got his son killed in the last plague, he was ready to let the people go. So I wanted to make a quick comparison. It's like, why was Pharaoh so stubborn? Well, you have to remember, the Hebrews were the slaves. They were the backbone of the Egyptian economy, the Egyptian home building association, right? It was all the Hebrews making all them bricks. And so without the Hebrews, they didn't have housing. They didn't have storehouses. They didn't have buildings, essentially, barns and everything you need to run a city or run an empire. And Pharaoh was not going to give up his slave labor without a fight. And if you think about it, the American Civil War of 1861, the North had a total deaths of 364, able-bodied men versus 260,000 able-bodied Southern men. All died in that war. Over 500,000 people dead from a war just to free the slaves. There are some other things involved, but that was the primary impetus for the American Civil War, was the freedom of the slaves. And look how stubborn these guys were. They couldn't just pass a law. The Confederates couldn't just say, okay, we'll free the slaves, we'll have a 10-year plan, whatever. No, they had to go to war, and they killed each other. And if you look at those numbers, the only reason why the North won was because we had more guys to die. And that's it. Same thing in the World War II out in the Pacific Ocean when we fought the Japanese out there. It was like the Battle of Manila. We had 15,000 Americans, and they only had 10,000 Japanese. And at the end of it, there were 5,000 Americans standing. It's like you kill almost a 1-to-1 when you go to battle. It's very unusual if there's a discrepancy in battle and warfare. I mean, it happens, but usually it's because one side has taken a leap in weapon technology. Then they take a leap, but then they figure it out, and it goes back to one-on-one. So usually wars are won by whoever has the most people going to war. Little side trail there. So the Passover implementation, just to remember everything, because this is the most important thing from the 10 plagues, to get the Passover lamb, which was Jesus, no broken bones. Jesus had no broken bones. We've gone over all of that previously. I highly recommend those previous videos. Hyssop makes an appearance, taking the blood, putting it on the lintel. They gave Jesus the hyssop vinegar to drink, which is very bitter, and bitter herbs are part of the Passover meal. The blood on the doorpost, very similar to the cross itself. Unleavened bread, which begs changing the bread. Jesus changed the bread to leavened bread, meaning yeast. It's a pun on risen, your bread rises, so you get, rather than get crackers, you get actual bread, as in risen from the dead. And then, of course, the cup of Elijah that Jesus drank from and said, "This is the wine is now my blood, given for the sins of many." And in Psalm 105, the Lord gives us a, what do you want to call it? A summary of the whole 10 plagues, which is 10 chapters in Exodus, but Psalm 105 covers it in just a few verses. So let's read it real quick. "Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the people. He sent Moses, his servant, and Aaron, whom he had chosen. They showed his signs among them and wonders in the land of Ham. He sent darkness and made it dark, and they rebelled not against his word. He turned their waters into blood and slew their fish. Their land brought forth frogs in abundance in the chambers of their kings. He spoke, and there came divers sorts of flies and lice in all their coasts. He gave them hail for rain and flaming fire in their land. He smote their vines also and their fig trees, and brake the trees of their coasts. He spake, and the locusts came, and caterpillars, and that without number, and did eat up all the herbs in their land, and devoured the fruit of the ground. He smote also the firstborn in their land, the chief of all their strength. He brought them forth also with silver and gold, and there was not one feeble person among their tribes. Egypt was glad when they departed, for the fear of them fell upon them, that they might observe his statutes and keep his laws. Praise ye the Lord." So if you ever want to get a quick refresher on the 10 plagues, Psalm 105. Now I'm going to give you a very, very serious foreshadowing. I hope you made it this far. Revelation 11:6, Moses as a witness. "These have the power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will." My hope for this channel is that I'm going to go through this entire Bible. And when I get to the book of Revelation, hopefully even more of that book is revealed to me as I review everything I've learned over my 40 years of being a Christian. I think I was 19 when I became born again. So yeah, we're talking 40 plus years now. So I'm hoping to put it all together and to learn even more revelation when I get to the book of Revelation. There's still a lot that's hidden from me, but chapter 11 is not. And so I wanted to put this little bug in your ear. And that is where they're referring to Moses in the book of Revelation, chapter 11, verse 6. And anyway, there you go, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care, and until next time.